Pursuant to Section 84-1412 in the Nebraska statutes, the public is hereby informed that a current copy of the Nebraska Meetings Act is located in the board meeting room on the north wall. First tonight, we will have our new board member, Tracy Cassidy, take the oath of office.
Is it on? Whatever you guys want.
It's up to you. It's your swearing-in ceremony. It's for your family.
Okay, anytime? Okay. This is the oath of office. I, Tracy Cassidy, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Nebraska against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will take this obligation freely and without mental reservation or for the purpose of evasion, and that I will faithfully and impartially perform the duties of the office of member of the Board of Education, according to law and to the best of my ability. And I do further swear that I do not advocate, nor am I a member of any political party or organization that advocates the overthrow of the government of the United States or of this state by force or violence, and that during such time as I am in this position, I will not advocate nor become a member of any political party or organization that advocates the overthrow of the government of the United States or of the state by force or violence. So help me God. Thank you. Thank you.
Official. She can't leave now.
Now it is official, and you are not allowed to resign or run for other office until the end of your term. Not that we can officially hold you to that. Roll call, please, Mr. Ray.
Cassidy. Godding.
Here.
Here.
Hallman.
Here.
America.
Present.
Perlman.
Here.
Ryan. Scanlon.
Present.
Snow.
Here.
Williams. 7 present.
Both Ms. Williams and Ms. Ryan let us know that they would not be here tonight. Since we are voting on things, should we go ahead and excuse them? Mr. Ray is nodding yes. So I would accept a motion to excuse both Ms. Williams and Ms. Ryan.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. We have a motion by Mrs. Godding and a second by Dr. Holman to excuse the absences of Ms. Williams and Ms. Ryan. Roll call, please, Mr. Ray.
Godding.
Aye.
Hallman.
Aye.
America.
Aye.
Perlman.
Aye.
Scanlon.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
7-0.
Motion passes. We'll move on to our consent agenda, which is item E, and I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda that is before us.
So moved. Whoops.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Snow and second by Mrs. Godding. Are there any abstentions? All right, seeing none, roll call, please.
1 second here. Hallman. America.
Aye.
Perlman.
Aye.
Scanlon.
Aye.
Snow.
Aye.
Cassidy.
Aye.
Godding.
Aye.
7-0.
Motion passes, and I believe Mr. Evans has an update related to that.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to introduce and at least have them stand our new employees that were just approved as per the consent agenda. And we'll start at the back of the room with Barb Wild, Executive Director for Elementary Education. Barb Wild is previously, most recently, has been the principal at Field Club Elementary. Barb, thanks for joining us on that leadership position. And then I'm going to turn, and we'll just ask that they all stand so we can give them some applause when we're done. To my left is C.K. Clark Kazmarek, and C.K. is currently at Central High as an assistant principal, but he'll be moving to Buffett Middle School as our new principal there. And next to C.K. is Dr. Carrie Moore. Carrie is currently the assistant principal at Bryan Middle School and will be the new principal of Norris, the home of the Redbirds. And let me see if I have others here behind me. I know we have several others, but they were not able to attend tonight due to some other engagements because they didn't know they would be on the agenda. So please, let's give them a round of applause for being a part of our staff. Oops, I'm sorry, we do have one more too. Not a new leader for our leadership team, but Melissa Colmine has been recently and just tonight approved as our new Chief Academic Officer. And so Melissa Colmine, thank you for moving into that role, and we look forward to your leadership there as well. Thank you, Madam President.
All right, we will move on then to our information items. And up first is item F1A, the Student Transportation and Student Assignment Plan Update. The purpose of this workshop is to receive an update on student transportation and the student assignment plan. And I believe Mr. Evans is starting us off.
Just a couple of comments, Madam President. I'm looking forward to this evening and talking a lot about what we've done since a year ago when we were working with some of the challenges of finding enough bus drivers and the timeliness of finding those bus drivers, as well as communication with our parents. And I think tonight you're going to see some pretty significant progress in how all of this is working together, from how the routing process works, to how the communication systems work, to how we are coordinating and working closely with David Prince and STA. It's been something that we've spent a lot of time and energy on, so I'm planning on it being a much smoother start than last year, and I think Mr. Prince would agree, and probably Mr. Salas as well. I also know we've got the student assignment plan tonight, although I think the actual bigger topic is probably our transportation system. So with that, I'll turn it over to, I'm not sure if the STA staff or the SAP folks are going to start first.
Well, first I want to talk a little bit about what's on the agenda, and thank you, Mr. Evans, too, for that introduction. So the first two items that you'll find as attachments are the overview of the presentation, and then also a longer explanation that Travis is going to provide throughout the meeting. So those are two documents that are uploaded on to e-meetings, the first two. Then the other 12 or 10 or whatever those numbers are very carryovers from the February Board of Education workshop. So just as a reminder, we did do that February workshop that was really in-depth to the student assignment plan. This workshop will focus a lot more on the transportation component with a summary at the end, maybe 2 or 3 slides about the student assignment plan. So first, it'll be about the student transportation, preliminary routing, and then it will wrap up tonight with student assignment plan. There is a break in the middle there for questions, so if you have questions as you go through, we have notepads, if you could write those down, and then we will stop before the student assignment plan to answer any of the questions that you may have or that come up throughout the presentation. So with that, I'm turning it over to, I believe, Travis, who will then kick us off.
Thank you, Matt. First of all, I would like to say to the board that student transportation and STA have been working tirelessly with several divisions within the district to address some of the concerns, or most of the concerns that have been identified last year during the startup. In addition, this past year, we've heard a lot of constructive feedback from parents, students, families, school administrators, the community at large, in reference to some of the initiatives they would like to see and concerns they had. In addition to that, the district last year commissioned an audit to take place that was conducted by the Council of Great City Schools, and they as well gave us some feedback. So the audit findings, along with the feedback we received from the community has prompted student transportation to make some enhancements in our day-to-day operations, as well as some modifications in terms of preparing for the upcoming school year. So what I'd like to do this afternoon is me, along with my team, just address some of the changes that we have made. I want to stick to 5 key areas, those being communications, systems, training, collaboration, and then finally finish up with discussing some of the preliminary routing for this upcoming 2017-18 school year. In terms of communication updates, generally every year we send out a correspondence to the parents in reference to their child's transportation schedule. That correspondence generally has expectations that we require the students on the bus, as well as the pickup and drop-off locations, the time, and the schedule for the student. What we are doing, normally we send that information out generally 1 week prior to the start of school. What we plan on doing this year is that communication will go out to the parents 2 weeks in advance. This additional week that we're sending that information will allow the parents the opportunity to review their child's bus schedule. In addition to that, if there are any incorrections on that, it will allow them enough time to get that information to us, and our routing team will have an opportunity to make those changes, get a new letter out so that we have more parents with their correct information ready to go on the first day of school. In addition to that, we've added some additional verbiage to the letter now that is asking parents, if they are not in need of our services for the upcoming year, to please contact the Student Transportation Department so that we can take the student off the route sheet. We don't anticipate to get a large volume of people to call in to do that, but any minimal number that we get will help us in terms of routing more efficiently. In addition to that, we plan on this year having communication go out to the parents with all the updates that we're sharing with you tonight. We will send that out either via a postcard or some type of communication with working directly with district communications. So in terms of the non-ridership notification, parents will definitely have that information in advance. It'll be an additional week that will help a lot of them in terms of that service that we have for them. Moving on to our transportation website, will have, I should say, right now it's under construction. By the start of this upcoming year, it will have some new features such as we have enhanced it from a standpoint, will offer multiple languages to parents and the community. There also will include answers to frequently asked questions from the parents, as well as a direct link to the new Partner Plan Zone website. Also now, one of the big things you will see is the letter that goes out, and with our website. In the past, parents were offered 3 phone numbers. They had the OPS student transportation main line number, then there was a STA North Base number, and then there was a STA South Base number. Now there will be one single point of contact phone number, so when parents call, they will be addressed by any one of the parties, whether it be OPS or STA, but there will only be one point of contact number. In addition to that, on that website, we also now will have an email account that the parents, if they do not want to call us, they can email us, and we will have staff assigned to respond to any email inquiries within 24 to 48 hours. In terms of the phone system, student transportation, that division had a phone system that had been outdated for quite some time. We were fortunate to work closely with IMS, and they had a team that came in and really helped us by upgrading our new phone system. We now have a new Cisco phone system, which will allow us the ability now to disperse calls. We will be able to monitor how many calls are coming in, what the call volume is like. We'll be able to transfer calls internally as well as externally. We'll be able to determine how long the call time is that the parent stayed on with our staff. We also will have administrative rights for staff to see who's actually on the phone and who's not. This was critical for us last year because one of the biggest problems we had and concerns from parents was our phone system. To give you an example, one of the other issues that was happening is there was limited access to our service provider, STA. So what we had happening was a parent may call STA and would ask them, can you tell me what bus does my child ride on? At that time, after waiting 10 to 15, 20 minutes to get through, STA would say, we don't have that information. You have to hang up and call OPS. Or vice versa, last year, parents would call OPS and ask for information such as where is my bus, meaning the STA bus, and our phone staff had to say to them, you have to hang up and call STA. What we've done now is provided STA with limited student information so that when parents contact them, they will be equipped with the information to answer questions in terms of student schedules, where the bus is, pickup times, whatnot, as well as OPS staff will now have information in terms of GPS. The phone staff will now have the GPS information, so when a parent would call OPS transportation, they would now be able to look it up and see exactly where that bus is. And that's a big improvement in terms of where we were last year at this time. We also are looking forward to OPS and STA have partnered up with a new party, another partner, if you will, North End Teleservices, which is a small emerging business here in North Omaha, and they will be adding to our phone staff at the beginning of the year. What we will have now, we're working with North End Teleservices, is 14 additional staff, phone staff, at the beginning of the year during peak times. And we define those peak times as 6 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. and then 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. And so we feel having these additional 14 people during that time, it will not fix, it doesn't guarantee that we still will not have a high call volume, but it certainly will be a bigger dent into addressing those calls for us. And that was a major piece. So what I would like to do before I go any further in my presentation is introduce the president and CEO of North End Teleservices, Ms. Carmen Tapio, who's here. She has been, I can't say how much of an asset she has been to our team in preparing for this upcoming year. Her team has came in, rolled up their sleeves, and jumped right in. She served almost as a project manager for us in terms of this phone system. There's a lot of moving parts going on, and she's really taken ownership of that with her team, and she'll be able to update the board in terms of the process and the training. We now, when I talk about this single point of contact in terms of the phones, now we'll be at a point where STA, OPS, and NET all will be on the same page with the same phone system, prepared to answer the same information. So with that being said, I'd like to yield to Ms. Tapio.
Thank you, Travis. Good evening. I'm Carmen Tapio, as Travis said. I'm President and CEO of North End Teleservices, and it is a pleasure to be here with you this evening. This program is so important to me that while we do have other business that we're operating within our call center, I am personally leading and managing the project implementation on behalf of our company and the district and STA. So I want you to know that it has an awful, well, the highest level of visibility within my organization, and I'm personally hands-on. I've been in the business for over 30 years, so everything in my head you get, and it's an honor to do that because I do understand how important it is. And one of the things that we've talked about, is creating a call center network. So I understand that there have been some informal processes in the past that people have been assigned both within OPS and STA. We are, of course, contracting with both organizations, but we're adding some additional resource and support so that we can create a true network on your behalf for transportation student transportation. So we have a diagram. I don't know how clearly you can see that, but this depicts what that network is essentially going to look like and how it's going to work. STA has a number currently, a main number that will be forwarded to the new transportation number for OPS. And that is something that's happening behind the scenes. It's just a way of getting calls from STA to that number, so it's seamless as far as parents or callers are concerned. From that, there are a series of prompts, and we'll go through that on the next slide in a little bit greater detail. But calls are routed first to North End Teleservices. We have 14 people, as Travis mentioned, that are specifically assigned, but in addition to that, we have other employees that we can cross-train, that if the need arises, we can have people that are trained on the processes and the systems that are required to support you that are available. So that's where calls initially come in, and that's where parents will hear the prompts. It's an automated system that will prompt them to press 1, 2, we've all done it before, to press 1 for student eligibility, 2 for special needs, and if they do nothing or they press 3 or any other key, it will go directly into North End Teleservices. So that's the main pool of agents, if you will. From there, you can see that we have, hopefully you can see, we have STA, this is the NET, North End Teleservices queue, student eligibility, OPS transportation, excuse me, this is high school eligibility here. And what we're doing is we're setting up a tiered approach. So the thought behind it in order to create capacity is that all representatives would be trained on most of the call types. The exceptions to that would be special needs and high school eligibility. Those calls, high school would go to Annie's group, and if there are any specific calls related to special needs, those calls can go to Travis's group. But in general, the greater pool of agents will be able to take the majority of the phone calls. So here you see we've got the STA group. And these little bodies are not necessarily representative of the actual number of people that will be there at any given time. Within the STA group, we have also identified a couple of people, depending on the volume and the needs, an escalation tier, so that if there are particular issues that come up, we can online transfer from the NET group, or really within any of the agent groups. We can transfer calls to specific individuals or specific departments, both at STA, and you'll see it over here at OPS, and then this is high school eligibility. So there's a tier 1, if you think of tier 1 as this entire process, and then think of tier 2 as these subgroups or these smaller bubbles within this network. Okay? So then if we go on to the next slide, the benefits, as Travis said, reporting is a major one, and I really have to compliment Rob Dixon and Jonathan Kelly and the entire IMS team for choosing the platform that you did. I've bought pretty much every platform out there in my years, and Cisco is one of the best platforms that there is. And so what you will have the ability to do is get robust reporting. Really important to capture data, and especially now that you have the system, almost capture probably more data than you need, but better to have more than not enough. So this will be an opportunity to baseline number of calls that you're receiving, to baseline, as Travis mentioned, how many minutes or how many seconds it takes to respond on average. And that allows you to do some forecasting and some trend analysis, we're hoping, for years to come. The ability to use the call log is something that I know that your organization has been working very hard on, to disposition and understand not only how many calls, but why people are calling as well. And within that call log, there is the ability to also escalate critical issues through the system, as well as transfer calls online real time to the correct department. Call tracking, creating capacity, as I mentioned, so a pooling of resources, a coming together, but also doing it in that last point in a seamless way. So that, what we're essentially doing is we're creating a brand or a customer experience. 31 people from OPS, STA, and North End Teleservices will be getting training on Wednesday. And it's not just training on the systems, it is training on the customer experience. And so the branding piece, the consistency of what people say, what the responses are, and how to use the system, I think is a critical piece of what's being accomplished here. So one voice, a centralized system and network that brings consistency, soft skills, technical skills, and doing it in a very consistent way. This slide depicts in a little bit greater detail what the customer will experience or what the parent will experience. So starting at the top here, again, the STA and the OPS new number, and that's a little small for me to read, so I'm going to go to my slide. They will hear a thank you message, and then if, again, they do nothing, the call will go to the main pool. If they press 1 for high school eligibility, it will go to Annie's group, and Annie will be talking more about that. If they press 2, if they press 2, it will go into the high school eligibility queue, and then everything else will go into the main North End Teleservices queue, or the main pool. Okay? So that's the general call flow. And I think it's also important to consider that changes can be made dynamically in this sort of environment. So if we find that prompts need to be changed based on now your greater ability to report, you now have the flexibility to make those changes. If you have a weather situation, if you have any sort of incident that comes up that you need to address right away, you can do that now through your prompts. And you can do that in a dynamic sort of way. And from a staffing standpoint, if we need to shift resources or reallocate resources, that can be done as well. But overall, that's the general call flow. We are honored and excited to be a part of the process. And like I said, you can have anything that's inside my head. There's a lot there. But we've been working very hard as a team since May, using a very project management, a very disciplined approach to this whole process. And we're feeling very good about where we're at at this point. So, all right.
Thank you very much, Carmen. Also, I'd just like to say, she did say that we will start training. That training will take place for the remainder of the week and next Monday as well. And that training will consist of STA staff, OPS staff, and NET staff. And that will be training not just over the phone systems, but it will be over the phone system, our call log system, and our GPS system, and a refresher training of the new partner plan, just so that everybody is up to speed and everybody is on the same page. So again, we will have that training going on for the next week to prepare for this upcoming year. Moving on to system updates, one of the things that we've had in the past was an effort to enhance student safety, as well as addressing some of the parent concerns in terms of buses and where's my bus and bus notification. I know that's been something that's been discussed on several occasions. Student safety, this whole process started with our strategic planning, if you will. Student safety, we initially looked at because when a student was coming up missing, you had a missing child, there were a lot of effort and resources and man hours being put in to trying to find where this student was. And what we were finding out after hours of high anxiety, parents being upset, police being called, we were finding out that the child had either stayed after school for an after-school activity, had a detention, or decided just to go over a friend's house and did not notify their parents. So what we had focused on initially with our strategic plan was getting a application that would allow us to track where a student is, whether or not they got on the bus or if they got off the bus. And that was the direction we initially were going. Most recently, based off of some of the feedback from the start of last year and throughout last year, there became a growing focus on having a bus notification to inform the parents, so a bus tracking system. After doing some preliminary research, there are systems out there that offer both, a student tracking as well as bus tracking. So our thought process kind of changed because it made more sense to get a bang for our buck and getting a system that offered both the bus and student tracking. So with that being said, there was a committee, Student Transportation formed a committee that is comprised of several different areas within the district, district communications, we have purchasing, we have school safety, we have IMS, SIS, we have various administrators from building principals. We also have some parents representatives and actually have one student representative on this committee. And what we have established is some goals that we are putting in place with the end goal of getting a bus slash student tracking system in place. So what I'd like to do at this time is just kind of go over the things that we have completed and then update you on some of the things we still have to do to meet the complete the ultimate project. Right now we have identified, we picked 5 vendors to consider for a demonstration process. We have already completed that. We have selected the 5 vendors. We also have already scheduled the vendor presentation over the product, the student tracking product. And then there were questions to be prepared. And what we did with preparing these questions is we asked each member on that committee to submit to us at least 5 questions. And we did that intentionally because we wanted to get feedback from IMS perspective on what they thought was necessary, what district communications thought was necessary. The couple parents that's involved, from a parent perspective, what do you think we need to ask this vendor? Obviously the students, school safety. So we asked each person on the committee to submit questions to us. They did submit that information to us, as well as the schools. We've identified 5 schools throughout the district that we would do this initial demonstration on. And then most recently in May, there were the vendor presentations. So we actually had the vendors come in as of already, and they did do presentations. There was no discussion of money or anything dealing with financial matters. It was truly just to show us what did their product offer. Moving forward, the things that we need to do still is, in terms of determining the length of the demonstration, we're recommending that 90 days. We're thinking that demonstration will probably last for the first part, the first semester of this upcoming year. And again, that's working with the vendors. They will all do their demonstration at the same time. We will have to work closely with district communications to get the communication plan in place for the schools and the families that are participating in the process, as well as establishing a survey so that we can get it out to the participants to get feedback from them, not only the families but the schools. Once we get that feedback from everyone, we will use that information to establish our RFP, along with other things to put together the specifications, if you will, for the RFP. Then we will work closely with IMS and the purchasing department to put together that RFP. Then it will go out to multiple vendors over and beyond the 5 that we use for the demonstration. Once that information goes out, obviously, and we have the bid opening and kind of compile the information, review it, then it'll be prepared to present to the board for board approval. If that is successful, then we would start working directly with the vendors to figure out what is their communication rollout plan, what is their whole process. We will work closely with district communication and that vendor. One of the things that we would request is specifically that they have some PR team that will take lead and play a major part in making sure that information is communicated out to the families. The next system update we have, and Carmen did speak on it briefly, is our incident reporting log. Again, IMS, and we've done so much work during this process with IMS to get the technology upgraded in our division. Right now, it's student transportation. When calls come in, if there's messages, it works. We do it the old school way. It's just a pen and a piece of paper. And we take those messages, write them down, and just hand them over to any appropriate staff. For this upcoming year, the goal is to have our incident reporting log in place. This log will then allow us the ability to disseminate information in an expeditious manner. So one of the things that's really big for us is accidents. And that process is so long because there's so many people you have to touch and so much information you have to gather and pass along. With this new incident reporting log, we'll have the ability to have, whether it be OPS, STA, or NET, because everybody's linked now on the same system. They will be able to input that information, mark it as urgent, send it off to all the key people. Over at, say, OPS, we will have the ability with the workflow to disseminate that immediately to all the key areas within the district, such as the Office of Family and School Engagement, medical services, human resources for insurance purposes. All that information can be disseminated immediately. If it's something that's escalated to a higher level, say we have students that were involved in an accident, and now we have students that need to go to the hospital, that workflow can drop to me and I can immediately push it on and it will go to the exec council. And those are things that we never had the ability to do, as well as from a historical standpoint. One of the things that happens a lot is you may get a parent that calls and says, this particular corner is a dangerous corner, or the kids always mess up my landscape. Could you not put a bus stop there? And obviously staff will write that information down on a piece of paper, but over a year or so, that information is housed away and you no longer have it. I think it came up during discussions, there was an accident during this past year, and one of the things that was reported was one of the parties said, we've contacted student transportation and told them about this area before. Well, with this new system, we'll be able to put that information, whether it's a parent name, or address, a student's name, or a location, we'll be able to put that in there. And if someone was to call us about it down the road, we would be able to search it, and at least it would give us a baseline of having some information to address them. So that really helps us, and it also will help us in terms of putting some key performance indicators in place for us. Then we can really start tracking how many accidents do we have, how many calls on a particular area. When we deal with a lot of calls from parents that may say there's a perpetrator in their area, and that information will allow us to house it, and we'll be able to use it for trending data to see, for example, our accidents, are they going down over the course of the years? It'll be a lot easier for us to gather that information. In terms of collaborations, the recruitment, transportation now is working closer than ever with human resources. We are now engaged in interviews for our drivers. We are participating in the interview process. We're helping with the advertising piece. Staff have been involved in job fairs. There was a job fair as recent as last week where we had staff on site interviewing at the job fair. There's one that will be coming up in the next week or so, and student transportation is engaged in that, as well as we're working with district communications and human resources and a company. We will now use one of our wheelchair buses that will be out of service, we're going to have that wheelchair bus wrapped. And what we're going to do is provide some job opportunity information on that particular school bus. And then that school bus will be used to stage at different areas throughout the community that are highly visible, so that the community will see that there are job opportunities in student transportation. We also will use that vehicle in terms of, we have 2 remote control buses, Barney and Buster, that are used to educate elementary age students on bus expectations and emergency behavior on the school bus. And so what we'll do is, as the training staff goes to various elementaries throughout the community, they will use that bus to transport those 2 remote control buses. And so you'll see that wrap bus throughout the city at different schools. In terms of STA, we will continue to receive a monthly comprehensive report in regards to their recruiting efforts and what their staffing numbers look like. We'll continue to receive that throughout the year on a monthly basis. With that being said, I'd like to also introduce to you the next member on the team tonight, Mr. David Prince, who is a regional vice president for Student Transportation of America. And Mr. Prince will be able to go over the stats and the status of their recruitment efforts and where they're sitting in terms of their staffing. I would like to say this, again, we appreciate all the efforts that Mr. Prince has done in terms of representing STA to ensure that they are committed to ensuring that we start out the year as successful and we don't have some of the concerns that we dealt with at the start of last year. Mr. Prince.
Thank you, Mr. Salas. Last year when we started this whole process, I had an afro, as you can see. Don't have any hair now, but I'm going to keep what I have going forward. Thanks a lot, Travis. And a couple of important things I want to touch on I think are so important that I think everybody needs to be aware of is now we have access to the student information. We could not utilize NET services if we did not have access to the student information. In the past, we were not able to answer calls intelligently, and it was frustrating for a parent to call in and say, what bus does my child ride? And that conversation never goes well when you have to tell them you don't have the answer. So I want to thank Mr. Salas for expediting that whole process of STA, getting that student information, and also bringing NET on board to be able to share in this process. NET are the professionals that are doing this. They're teaching us something in the customer service related field, but they're the professionals, so we're going to try to emulate them going forward. But having access to that information is probably one of the most key points going forward. I also want to talk about the driver report because I think that's why a lot of people are here. I wanted to kind of get into the preliminary routing before we went to the numbers, but you can see that I'm smiling as far as the numbers are concerned because it's a lot different than it was last year. At the start of last year, we had 476 routes. Based on the student assignment plan and efficiencies that were achieved with the OPS transportation, we'll start the school year off with 332 routes. 332 routes, and right now we have 427 drivers on hand. So you can see that's in excess of 85 plus drivers that we have to find a home for. It's great to be in that position, and we'll be able to do a lot of things going forward. My pocketbook is a lot lighter than it was last year, but it was a lesson learned, and I think to be able to service the children better, having a bus there, same driver, same time, same route, and being able to track the buses. I think we learned a lot from last year through some of the experiences, being able to share some of the technology that we have in place where OPS transportation can have access to see where our buses are, what time they arrived at the stops, and being able to have that conversation with parents and saying, yes, the bus was at that stop at so-and-so time. As the school year went on, we got better and better at accessing or utilizing the technology to be able to answer the questions intelligently. And going into this year, all the things that we put in place with NET as well as OPS transportation, the one call number, I think you're going to see sort of a dramatic improvement over the way things were going last year. So I'll get straight into the numbers. That 439 was what we had at the end of the school year. Again, I said 427. I want to be precise when I tell you the 427. We have 14 AM drivers and 12 PM drivers. We do have drivers that work with us just part-time. Some work fire department, some work other jobs, FedEx. They may work in the morning. Their schedule allows them to maybe work in the afternoon or work in the morning. So in the past, we kind of paired these guys up and just said, okay, if you can come in every afternoon, we could utilize you. But right now, we have 378 regular drivers. That's an AM and PM driver that we can assign to the routes. So if you take 332 and we have 378, plus we have these 14 and 12 that AM or PM, and then we have the 11 in the progress. Last year, I think I kind of explained the process to you where it was a 14-day waiting period before they can get their license. We have 11 people in that process right now. As we talk about sort of the recruitment efforts, we put in place a hiring model back in February, March of this year, where we had some test markets up in other locations that were similar to Omaha. And one of the biggest things that was going on is that when I wanted to send people on my staff to other locations to kind of see what their hiring models looked like, they always said it did not model what was going on in Omaha. But when I sent them there and they saw exactly the same challenges that we were facing in Omaha, they came back with a new sort of perspective. And from that, we were able to start hiring brand ambassadors. Who better to tell potential applicants what kind of job it is driving a school bus? So what we did, we started hiring our own drivers to actually go out and become a part of the recruitment process. We spent numbers and numbers, gobs of money to try to get people in. And people don't read the newspaper anymore. Unfortunately, that's where I get my news from, but a lot of younger people, they don't read the newspaper, more rely on social media, but we still weren't getting that number in like we wanted. So we implemented this brand ambassador program, and before we received the preliminary routing and we kind of knew what the numbers were going to look like, we put this in place. We sent them out, and the results were, we couldn't believe it. Even our own staff couldn't believe it. First of all, why did we didn't figure this out before someone else did? But when we put it in place, immediately we got the response. And the main thing this whole recruiting effort was about was going into targeted areas. The majority of our drivers work and live in a certain area. And when we did the demographics on it, we were able to see exactly where our target base was. So we immediately dispatched our brand ambassadors to that particular area. Immediately, we got the responses that we didn't know were out there. You know, we tried so many different ways of getting their attention, but the best way we found is sending them actually out there where they live, where the majority of our drivers live, and majority of them want to work close to where they live. So we sent them out. They were able to get quite a few in. And I can tell you the retention and getting those drivers in, once we got them in, got them trained, got their license, then it was a part of retaining them. In the school bus industry, it's very difficult to hold on employees from year to year, and we experienced that last year. People tell you they're coming back, and they don't come back. We didn't do everything we should have done last year in reaching out to them, staying in touch over the summer, creating an avenue to increase that communication to continue to pull them in. This year, some of the things that we're doing is we're doing actually a ball game this weekend with the Storm Chasers. We have a picnic, we feed them, we ask them to come out, but not only do we ask them to come out, we ask them to bring their families. And this was such a big hit last year, we decided to try to do it for 2 sessions this year. So we'll have 2 events that we'll have our drivers coming out, just kind of trying to continue to engage them and let them know that it's not just a job, but we're family. And once we connected with as many drivers as we have, we realized that when we started asking the question, why do you do this job? And 85% to 90% did it because they wanted to be a part of the children's life. And that's when we understood sometimes we were recruiting the wrong people. We were recruiting people who were doing it because they want to get paid. You're never going to get rich in any job you work in. And there was always a thing of, we don't get paid enough. But when we went out and we went to our recruiting and we targeted the areas, those people had the same idea of why they wanted the job. It's because they wanted to transport the children and be in the children's lives. So that's been very effective for us this past summer. I'm moving to, that's pretty much most of what the recruitment, and I think that was one of the biggest questions. What do we look like going into the new year? Travis and NET talked about all of some of the processes that we put in place to address some of the concerns that parents may have, being able to identify where a bus is. And now everybody can do that. The phone system, the way it's set up, I'm impressed. And with the training happening next week, I don't know if Travis or Carmen are okay with this, but I would invite you guys to come out because you're going to get these questions about what are we doing different. But if you see us, if you see the staffs and you see the passion that everybody's putting into this because of these processes that we were able to enhance, you'll see that everybody's committed to a great startup. Maybe I'll grow some hair back.
Thank you, Mr. Prince. We want you to grow some hair back.
Can I add one comment?
Sure.
If you're coming, let me know because I'm making popcorn balls. So just let me know, okay?
All righty. Going on to increased collaborations. So the contractual oversight. The district will continue to assess liquidated damages if necessary. And I just want to update the board on kind of how that process goes. There's two avenues that we use for liquidated damages. One being a GPS report. Every day, our staff, designated staff, receive a report. And this report identifies all the buses that are arriving late to the respective schools. And per the contract, there's a fee charge for each area, if you will. So for a bus that's more than 10 minutes late, there's a $30 fee. For every bus that's more than 20 minutes late, there is a $50 fee. For any bus that's more than 30 minutes late, or it will be considered a missed route, and that charge is generally, it's not generally, it is 1.5 times that bus rate for the day. And so what happens is we get the GPS report daily, and there's a staff that goes over that. So you figure this past year, every morning, they look at approximately 400 buses to see how many of those were late. And then in the PM, they look at that same list again to check and see what buses are late. In addition to that, there is a bus bulletin report that is sent to our department either via a computer or there's text messages that are sent bus bulletin, and they're letting us know from STA standpoint what buses that are running late, what buses have to have sub-drivers, what buses have to be combined, which routes have to be combined. And so we use that as well as part of the tracking process to see what type of liquidated damages will have to be assessed to STA. In terms of, I know there was a question at one time about the after-school activity buses, how does that work? And still to this day, what we have to do, because there's so many changes on an ongoing basis with after-school activities, we have to rely on the building administrator or his or her designee to contact the student transportation department and notify us if there's a bus that's running late to an after-school event. Also, this year, for the first time, we will have a team of people, not just from the staff of student transportation, but I will invite a team to come with me down to the site of STA in the next week or so, and we will conduct an audit on-site audit where we will go through and check to see if they have exactly the amount of buses that we're requesting. Does every bus have a camera on it? Does all the cameras work? Are there computers in the building per the contract? Are all the mechanics there per the contract? The preventive maintenance, the mobile radios, it's the checklist of things that we will have a team actually go down there and physically look at in terms of making sure we're ready for the startup. One of the things we're excited about also this year is there will be a audit, not an audit, on August 9th, we will do a joint dry run. And so on August 9th, if you're driving down the street, I hope you will see a lot of buses on the street on that specific day because we're going to do a joint dry run with STA. And what that means for STA is it will allow the drivers an opportunity to get familiar with their route, get familiar with the neighborhood, some new neighborhoods, so that the startup or the first day of school, it'll be a minimal number of staff that get lost in terms of not being able to find that new address or that stop location, if you will. In terms of the OPS side, that will be the day that you'll see our buses out and the drivers and aides will be getting off the bus, walking up to the door, knocking on the door, introducing themselves to the parents. And this is critical for us as well because with transporting those special education students, it will allow the parents to have that one-on-one communication to tell the staff what are some of the additional things that their child may have that they want the driver to address, maybe some things that trigger a child's behavior on the bus. That would be the time, and this may be some information that's not on an IEP or maybe not on medical records. So this will be the time that's established for the parents to have that initial startup relationship, if you will, to set the tone for the beginning of the year. Also, in terms of the compliance or overview, I and my administrative team will go to August 4th route pick that STA is having. That will let me see the latest numbers in terms of people physically coming into the building to pick a route. So we'll know out of all the routes that we offer for STA to cover, how many people actually came in and picked a route. That would be our second to the last chance to see where we're sitting in terms of driving, staffing, if you will, prior to the first day of school. And then also we will have a contingency plan. In the worst case scenario, if there's not enough drivers, there is a backup plan in place to have alternate buses provided to make sure that we have all the routes covered for the start of the year. We have scheduled a joint meeting, if you will, with STA and OPS. That meeting has been scheduled and set to meet twice a month. For the last few months, we've been meeting every week. It's not just OPS and STA. It's been OPS, STA, NET, several divisions within the district. We've been meeting on a weekly basis, just covering all the things that we discussed today to ensure that we will be ready for the start. In addition, we will have the summer retreat. We will have facilitators come in, and the goal of that is for them to also offer us some additional team building exercises. We know at the beginning of the year now, having all these collaborations in place, it's a high anxiety time frame at the beginning of the year. And we got a lot of people taking in information that usually don't take in information. So we want to have team building skills in place, just set the tone for the year in terms of our relationship as well with STA. And then we also will have our business meeting, which will allow us an opportunity to go over the last minute operational things, if there's any contract things we need to address, if there are any procedural questions that staff may have on either side. All of that will be addressed in our summer retreat. phone service training. Again, this is in connection with the partnership with the Human Resource Department. Their staff development team has offered a series of training for our staff, and not just for OPS, but this is for OPS and STA staff. And it's going over phone etiquette. I mean, we have several calls that come in at the beginning of the year and throughout the year, and those phone calls come in all tones. I mean, some are really intense, especially at the beginning of the year. They kind of calm down, but we're getting a lot of good feedback and training from staff development to teach our staff and STA staff how to deal with the parents. And so what we have set up is there will be a series offered every quarter to STA and OPS phone staff. Some of the topics include, obviously, quality customer service, dealing with caller needs, going from good to great customer service, and finally through the customer's eyes. And so again, this will be training that's necessary to make sure we keep our phone staff sharp, to minimize the calls that may come to the superintendent office or the board in terms of some irate or upset parents. Student behavior training. So one of the things that we're doing is when it comes to bus drivers and aides, we know that bus drivers know the laws in terms of traffic. We know that they know all the laws that govern, if you will, student transportation or pupil transportation. One of the areas, though, that there needs to be a little more training on is just personal responsibility that the drivers have. And what we wanted to focus on was making sure that there was some training that was going on with the staff in terms of having better relationships with the students, the parents, and the schools. So what we have done is STA, I'll talk in two segments, if you will. STA will have professional development. Some of you may be familiar with the representatives of Visionary Leaders Institute. They were part of the team that was up at Nathan Hill helping with some of their training. They will have representatives that will come in and they will train staff on how to deal with parents, how to deal with the students, how to deal with the schools, and they'll deal with it from a different perspective. Things such as trying to get the drivers to understand there may be something going on in the child's home conditions that is affecting their behavior. They will talk to them about today's youth. You know, we have a lot of drivers, for whatever reason, there's a lot of old school drivers that just have a one-way mind of thinking things. This child needs to be this way, or all they need is this, and just have a real rigid way of thinking. And so this training will allow them to open up in terms of how they address students and the customer service side of it. So they will have that going on throughout the year. Theirs will be set up as well as a series of training, and it will happen on a quarterly process. In terms of OPS, the special education side, we will have representation from the Office of Special Education. They will come in and they will do a training to our staff, drivers and aides, and it will be more of a de-escalation training. And that de-escalation training will consist of different pieces or chapters from MANT training, as well as some segments from the MTSSB training. And so they will offer that to our drivers and aides. And basically this will also help our staff with the internal communication and training on how the drivers and aides can position themselves on the bus to prevent a child from either injuring themselves, injuring another student, or injuring staff. So that's real critical. We heard loud and clear from special education drivers and aides that, you know, there was concern sometimes if a situation escalates, how to deal with that situation. So that will be the focus on the special education training. And then let's talk about the preliminary routing piece. Kind of want to go over just the timeline, if you will. In past years, what we've done in student transportation is during the latter part or mid part of July, what would happen is we would send out to the service provider what was called, if some of you remember that notorious line, the route brains, if you will. And the route brains were if you will, an outline of a route. It gave the school that the bus was going to, the first stop in time and the last stop in time. And it was served a purpose to let our service provider know how many drivers they would need based off of the route brains. And that usually came out at the mid to latter part of July. And then we would get them the full detail routes by August 1st, which is per the contract. What we have done this year is we've pushed things back considerably. What we've done is on May 4th, I officially met with STA and certain members of the executive team with the district and verbally told STA what our bus number need would be, what our bus expectation would be. And at that time, we shared with them 390 buses is what we expected, and that was on May 4th. Then what we did is on June 7th, we provided them with the full detailed routes at that time, understanding that routes are subject to change due to the mobile population in the district, but we provided them with the detailed routes. The key piece to know with that, that's approximately 2 months prior than what we did in the past. And so that allowed STA the ability to have their route information so that they can start with their preparing process and putting things in place to address it with that 2-month head start. We are committed to giving them a report, update report every month leading up into school. So actually July 11th, tomorrow, they will receive an updated set of full detailed routes. I kind of want to take this time to kind of expand or clarify a comment that Mr. Prince has stated, just so that the board kind of understands these numbers. I don't want them to think there's a difference in numbers that he's committing to versus what the district is saying. What we did is there are actually 332 routes. That is what is necessary to start the year off, 332 routes. But we wanted to, from my standpoint, I wanted to be proactive to make sure that we had everything in place. So with that 332 routes, per the contract, there's an additional 10 activity buses you must have per the contract. And then there's also additional 10% spares you must have per the contract. And then I also put in as a contingency 10 to 15 buses for growth. Because when we started routing, as I said, pushing it back and giving them information starting in May, from May to August, things happen. And so I wanted to allow us enough room that if we gave them this number and then it growed, I did not want that to become an issue. So the actual route count is 332. But as of right now, we're sticking with 390 as our expectation of the service provider. And effective tomorrow, when they receive their detailed reports, that number will still read as 390. Moving on to our preliminary routing. I just want to cover, we based our routing this year off obviously the regular student assignment plan at the high school level and then the partner zone plan at the elementary and middle school level. What we did this year is we did a couple additional criterias that we used in terms of routing for more efficiency. What we did this year is on the preliminary routes, we had an option available if necessary and we needed to, we would consolidate routes that had students that attended Bryan High School and Bryan Middle School or Benson and Monroe. And we chose these sets of schools, obviously, because they're in close proximity. So if we had some students that attended either one of those schools and we could put them on the same bus, we would do it. I can tell the board we have not had to do that since the partner zone plan has the students more densely routed, there's no need at this point, but we still want to keep that option out there in case going forward or some point throughout the year, if we needed to keep efficiency, we would have that option available. Also in the past, in terms of ride time, with the exception of the learning community, the ride time for students was an hour. What we have done is increase that ride time to be up to an hour and 20 minutes. That up to an hour and 20 minutes would only affect the high school and middle school students. It wouldn't affect the elementary students. But I wanted to just emphasize to everybody, because with that starting that hour and 20 minutes, if we got there, that would mean a stop would start as early as 6 a.m. But I need to say this piece to everyone. Out of approximately 18,000 students that we have routed for that, we're only looking at 191 students that potentially could have a 6 a.m. start time. And out of that 191, we have it broken down as 56 of them would have a stop time from 6 a.m. to 6:10 between that time frame. Another 57 of them would have a stop time between 6:11 and 6:15. And then finally, 78 students would have a stop time between 6:16 and 6:20. Again, that's 191 kids out of 18,000 plus. So that's a small population of students, and again, that number could change. In terms of seating capacity, we're more efficient. Now we increased the number last year for elementary students. We would not put more than 52 students. We did increase that up to 55 this year. In terms of secondary students, last year the most we would put on was 48, and we have increased that number to 52. Again, and routes are subject to change at any given time. So now we will talk about where did that get us. Again, the numbers I'm giving now is not the route. This is about the expected buses, the expectation of buses we're asking them to have. Last year, there were 476 buses needed. This year, we're looking at 390, which is a decrease of 86 buses. In terms of students, last year we were transporting we prepared to transport 19,075. This year we're preparing for 18,195, which is a difference of 880 students. And then the great news, last year when we started out, we were looking at a budget of $26.6 million approximately, and that has decreased. This year we're looking at approximately $20.4 million, the difference being $6.2 million. So that was great information. The new partner plan really played a big part in that, along with the additional criteria used for routing students this year. So in closing, I would just like to say, Mr. Evans, board members, I cannot even say how much I appreciate all the efforts that went into this, all hands-in approach from several divisions within the district. I can't name them all. I would feel bad if I missed somebody, but everybody has helped us and continues to help us make sure that we're on point with starting out a good year. The team around this table, Annie, student placement, the research team, Matt, his efforts, and then obviously to have STA step up to the plate and let us know and reassure me that they're committed to starting out a good year, and then finally have our new partner at the table, Carmen with NET. So we look forward to a great year. I can say to everybody, one of the things I do want to say is I don't want anyone to be delusional about this, to think we won't have any problems. What I'm comfortable with saying is I feel we won't have the crisis. Will there still be hiccups? That's part of the transportation industry. You're still going to have the high volume calls. You're still going to have parents call and complain that some information was not correct. you're still going to have people call and complain that they don't get a bus now. So you will still get those calls, but I just don't want that to be mixed up or confused with we're still at crisis, because I think everything that we put ourselves prepared for, we should be sitting pretty good. That completes my portion of our team's updates of transportation.
All right, thank you. I do want to thank you all for the presentation. And I think it's reassuring to see that the things that we brought up last year about can we start things earlier, can we have more collaboration, can we have one specific phone number that can be given to parents instead of them having to call multiple numbers to figure out who they're supposed to be calling. I think it's very reassuring to see that we've tackled all those and we're working through all of those. Board member questions. Mrs. Gotting.
Snag the mic back here for a second. Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone here for all the hard work that you've all put into it. And I just have a couple thoughts to start off with. I do have a number of questions, but the first thing I want to really reflect on is that not only were some board members involved, but a number of people at this table were also involved, Mr. Ray, in March of 2014 in deciding, hey, we need to work on student assignment plan and try to create efficiencies and all of those things. So I want to thank you all. I know if you go past the question slide, there's a slide of the impacts of the new plan. I know that wasn't discussed a lot here tonight, but if you think back to February, a tremendous amount of information and a lot of hard work. And I want to thank Annie and research especially, because I know you've all put a lot into it. Second thought I had was, as Travis mentioned, just crisis. And crisis is never pleasant to go through, but sometimes when you're forced into a crisis, you recognize your deficiencies and you work to improve those. And so I think that's what's happened here. And even though, it was challenging and embarrassing a year ago in the fall, I think a lot of things have been worked through. So I want to thank you all for getting Carmen and Nat involved, because a really high quality call center can produce it can be tremendously successful. And having run a smaller call center inbound and outbound, I'm familiar with some of those reporting mechanisms, your hold time on calls, your length of calls, the way that you can communicate that, and then certainly to create a log so that you understand what's happening and that you can create kind of a better customer service plan. So I want to thank you for bringing your expertise to the table on that. That's huge. Can you give us some sense of a timeline, Travis, on the tracking for students and the buses? Do we have a goal of maybe a year from now? I know we've been talking about it for a couple of years, and there were different components that had to take place first. We've got the cameras on the buses now, and then this was kind of one of the next steps. So is that kind of our goal?
Yes, so in terms of the tracking, our timeline, the goal right now is to, as I said, the first semester we would have the demonstration take place. And then the second semester is when we would spend that time getting the feedback, preparing, doing everything it needs to take place to get that RFP out. Hopefully, by the end of this upcoming school year, we would be able to have a vendor identified. Now, one of the things we did do is kind of the committee did reach out to the vendors and ask them, with a school district comparable to our size, what did they think that whole timeline would take to really get a system out there and do it the right way based on our size. And right now, with the people that we just talked to, the multiple vendors that we spoke to, they were saying that ideally do it the right way. You're looking at least a year and a half.
Okay. No, that's great to know. I appreciate that. And then I guess the next question, and it kind of, it goes back to these numbers and all of that. So one of the things that you've talked about, Mr. Prince, is having the 332 drivers that you know you need, and having the regular drivers of 378. So And it also seems as though we're way ahead on route picking than we were a year ago. So I sense the August 4th because I think last year we were somewhere around the 12th or something. I don't quite remember. Is that right? Are you?
That is correct. We are so much far ahead than where we were last year. Leaps and bounds. I can't tell you how important that is. And I do want to kind of point out again, it was 476 routes at the start of last year. Now it's down to 332. So if you do the math, that's 144 less than it was last year. And that is so important because having enough people or enough employees to service any and everything that goes through the district is important. Our job now is to monitor the on-time performance, and we want to support the student assignment plan as much as we can. And also, with these additional drivers, this gives us the opportunity. In the past, we had to focus on the home to school, and we didn't allow a lot of schools to leave to go on field trips early. Now we have this opportunity for any educational opportunity they want to participate in. We can do that now. And it feels good because thinking of last year and where we are now, you know, we can look at each other and smile. And last year, you know, it was a frown, so.
I know. We weren't glaring, but it was probably close, right? So I guess one of the things that I want to share with the board, and I don't know if everyone was aware, but I know at the end of the school year when it came time to do field trips, that was probably one of the biggest complaints that I received was that especially fourth grade field trips to Lincoln were being cut short because everybody had to get back so that they could drive a route. And so there was not an opportunity for those field trips. So I'm excited to see these numbers because it means that the educational experiences that our students have will be enhanced by having enough drivers. My question for Mr. Travis is, so you've said 390, do we pay for what we actually use or do we pay for the full 390?
Great question. We pay for, we will not pay for the 10 to 15 buses that we did for growth. We would pay for the 10 activity buses per the contract, and then the spares we would pay as used.
Perfect. And that's
So
what-
it could be additional
Right.
savings. But again, I wanted to be conservative so that we wouldn't put ourselves in a bad predicament.
Right, and we saw some savings, just so everyone understands, if you look at the financial statements that come out every month, if you look at the transportation numbers, you'll see, and I think I've mentioned it through the budget meetings, we're seeing about $3 million of savings this year from actual to what we're budgeting. And so I guess to wrap it up, I'm thrilled that we're where we are. I know when research and student assignment plan committee were talking, we had this goal of hoping that we would have a $5 million efficiency, and to see greater than that is wonderful, and knowing that it even could be a little bit more would be great too. So I guess my last question in wrapping up is a question for Annie. Where do we stand on the families that we've struggled to connect with, and are we mostly where we need to be?
And yes, I can answer that, and that's after the question mark. We do just want to do a brief overview since you've all received the information about the partner plan before. We'll focus on the transportation first, but then I can certainly address the communication we're continuing.
Perfect. So thank you all so much for all the work you've put into this evening and just all of the prep time for getting ready for the school year end.
Mr. Perlman.
Thanks. Just want to also thank everyone for their hard work. It's good to see not only have everyone I've talked to on this, not only not shy away from the hard questions, but actually embrace them. So that's been great to see. I do have a couple questions. Hopefully I didn't miss any of this, but has there been any changes or consideration to the communication between the buildings and the transportation department, whether it be principals, assistant principals, or anything like that? Was there any need there that was looked at?
Is there specific changes? I can tell you changes. We have reached out to the staff. One of the things we will do is make sure that we really put the student handbook for administrators on the forefront so people can see it now. There is a handbook that kind of answers a lot of the questions. Over last year with the audit, there were some concerns that building administrators did have, and that's our fault that we didn't really advertise our handbook that could answer a lot of the questions and provide a lot of the information. For example, there are contact phone numbers, direct numbers for STA. I know that came up. The building principals wanted to have access so that they could contact someone directly with STA. And that information was in there. We just have to do a better job of making sure we get that out. And I'll work closely with district communications to make sure we put that on the front page for everything for the building administrators to have that access.
Okay. Taking a look at the PowerPoint presentation that we saw, something that I saw led to a question. On the slide that talks about one goal, one voice, it's approximately 8 to 10 slides in. Slide number 7. Could someone just explain to me, looks like there's a few different groupings of phone representatives. Are those, I know it's centrally routed, but are those separate teams, or are they, or is there some overlap? And what I mean by that, would some calls be taken by Student Transportation of America during heavy volume and things like that?
Yes, so during the peak hours is when NET will be online. So from 6 to 8:30 in the morning. And then during the off hours, calls are routed to Student Transportation or to OPS. And then NET comes back online in the afternoon. So while they are separate teams, I think one of the key elements is that the training is going to be consistent. And so our goal is that regardless of the time of day routing or the time of days that calls are coming in, that the experience is the same, that they are separate teams, if you will. I have to say that it has been a true collaboration as we have been building out this process, just to get everyone in training together, and we will be doing some team building things there as well, so that the teams are getting to know each other. So we're doing some things so that there's a consistent feel. They feel like they know each other, but they will be in separate offices, separate locations.
Okay. And will there just be, I see on the slide, one Spanish-speaking representative? Is that just one total?
There will be a Spanish-speaking person, employee, at the call center here, and there will be a Spanish-speaking staff person on site at transportation.
As well as at NET.
Okay. STA, so.
And what you see in the upper corner where it talks about the TAC call center, that is, it gets confusing when we say call center because we're talking specifically right now about transportation, but for the month of August, we're also doing the TAC operator, and so we have 3 staff members from student placement, or from our school support liaisons that will be there to answer questions, and we will also have ESL support there as well.
Okay. All right. My final question is just for Mr. Prince. You mentioned a couple times that preliminary numbers show that OPS expects to have 332 buses plus the 10%
Yes.
kind of safety net. Can you assure OPS families that there will be a driver for every single bus on day one?
I like to deal in probabilities. I would say it is a 97% probability that, yes, we will have a driver for every route, and then we'll have a driver as a spare for those who don't show up.
Okay. Thanks.
Yes.
And Mr. Perlman, and probability for that 97 to 3, we have contingency plan in place to cover.
Mr. Snow.
Thank you, Madam President. Again, just echoing from Ms. Scotting, thank you to Research, Transportation Department, STA, NET, Telecommunications, as well as the Student Assignment Plan Committee that kind of, when they were reshaping the Student Assignment Plan, as well as Annie, but you still have some more work to do after this conversation, and Mr. Ray. I have a couple of questions. I think the first one, it kind of stuck out to me, was the internal audit. Believe, Mr. Salas, that you guys are going to do. Is that just for your department, or is that something you're going to share? I just want to know just of expectations and what do you expect to do with that audit?
In terms of the audit, right now, I believe when the executive director did come, there were certain things in the audit we had already addressed in terms of the findings we had already addressed when he did his report. And then there are a lot of things that we did already. The biggest focus right now on the audit that we're really working on is the business plan and updating it and modifying it. So once that is all completed, then certainly I can address that.
Okay. And then you had another piece, I believe, that you said you guys were actually going to go to the site to
Okay.
walk.
And I apologize when you're talking about the audit. I'm
Sorry.
thinking about the other audit you're
Yeah,
talking about.
yeah, I'm thinking
going
about
on.
the-
Yes.
you
Now,
guys
what's the
actually-
question in reference to that audit?
What do you plan on doing with that audit once you go to the site? Is that something you're just going to keep
No,
in-house?
that
or
audit is
that-
for us to make sure,
Okay.
in terms of contract compliance, that they meet everything on the contract starting out the year, so that we're,
And could you give us that date again, just to?
I believe I did not give a date. It's going to happen the next week or two.
Understand,
I gotta get
understand.
the
You're
two.
fine,
Yeah.
you're fine. I just want to make sure, because I think that, when I heard that, it stuck out to me that actually you're going out to actually see the product to make sure, and that gives me a little bit more assurance that we're going to be at that 97, if not closer.
I'll be coordinating that with Mr. Prince. It's a couple days that it'll
Oh, you're
take to do that.
Perfectly fine, just need a clarification on that.
All right.
I have a side question that, it's a workshop, so I might as well bring it up. It's the I-48, I-480, that's going to be closed. So have you guys started to look into, City of Omaha's been doing a lot of highway work. That's going to be closed for 3.5 months. That's well into September. Have you guys factored into that hour and 20-minute?
And we
Routing
haven't, to be
time.
quite honest with you, but that's nothing out of the norm. That happens a lot
Okay.
for us. We had that, that was down for construction at a point last
Yeah,
year.
towards the end,
And
yep.
the detour, and we kind of went through it, and it was nothing major
Okay.
that threw it off. But obviously, when we do the joint dry run, that's something that can be addressed during that time frame as well to prepare.
Perfect. And I have two more questions. Actually, one is the tracking of the information that NET, NET, and STA and OPS. How are we going to be tracking that information? Is that your individual department? Is that research? Just to make sure that I understand we're collaborating well now, which is great. I just don't want us to get off track later on down the road, and it gets back into that.
I'll talk to this. So if you've been on Open Book, you know what Tableau looks like. We're actually going to pull those reporting mechanisms in and use Tableau to visualize it. So we'll have that on an ongoing basis.
Is that going to be, is that going to be ongoing updates to all three parties or just central office?
So we'll pull all that information into a database, and then we'll use Tableau to display it so it's graphical. People can
Perfect.
understand it.
Well, it's good to know, because it's really good having one source do that, especially if it's all trackable. So, thank you on that. And my final question is behavior training. I'm very excited that we're actually allowing bus drivers to experience training as well as de-escalation training, because I think that is something that is very crucial when sometimes you might be a bus driver and you don't know what to do, or sometimes you might be a bus driver and you're set in your own ways and you go too far in your de-escalation methods. In this, I would like to, just to be kind of sure a little bit, like breaking up fights, what is that protocol or anything on the bus? Is that the bus driver waiting, or is that the bus driver pulling off on the side of the road? I know you guys said before, sometimes it's hard for a bus driver to just pull off the side of the road if there's an issue that happens. We've had that in the past, but I just really interested. I mean, this is something that you can answer later, but if you can, I think that will help me a little bit, understanding from some people I've talked to about things that happen on the bus that the bus driver can't get to later on. And it's usually right at the beginning of the school year with trying to set those expectations.
And I kind of, a portion of that question I would yield down the road to special education department, because that will be part of that de-escalation training, that component piece I was discussing about positioning yourself so that you will be able to get in between two students, or between that student and the window, whatever the case may be. And then in terms of the process, if you will, the first thing as part of the Safe Pupil Plan that a driver should do is pull over to a safe location if they can. If they can't, obviously, first thing we're going to do is contact dispatch. Drivers are required to follow dispatch, the direction that they give them. And in most cases, what we do is, hopefully with this de-escalation training, they will be able to position themselves to serve as kind of a buffer, if you will, until the authorities can come on site.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Snow, we can provide the board with that training material as well.
It's just something for reference. I think that if somebody needs it, obviously it's not too crucial. Thank you.
Mr. Scanlon.
Thank you. I'd just like to echo everybody's just happiness that everybody collaborated together and worked on the communication, because, yes, we were at a very different point last year. But as an organization, you know, when you get knocked down, you got to get back up. And I appreciate that. We're making things better. We're looking to improve things for our students and for our families. Question that I had, with the call center, are we able to, in real time, track the number of callers we have on hold and the amount of time that they'll wait? Is that data available? And are we able to, if it's unexpected, I know you said you'd have 14, I believe, operators available. Is there if it's for some reason a very bad day, are we able to increase that significantly?
Yes, so in terms of the ability to track number of callers on hold, how long the calls are taking, number of callers that have abandoned, all of that information is available in a real-time environment. So, and one thing about call centers is you can't be passive. You have to be monitoring everything in a real-time environment, and we will have people that are focused on just doing nothing but that, but monitoring the volume and taking the appropriate management actions in order to respond to it. So that's one part of it. And the second is the 14 representatives are just the net representatives in the diagram that you saw on slide 7. There are also representatives at STA and OPS, as well as Annie's team that will be taking calls. So we will have a set staff, but as I mentioned very early, NET will also, we will take it upon ourselves to cross-train some of our additional reps that are on other lines of business, on other programs. And if we need to, and they're in a down period, then we can move them from another line of business and move them on to the student transportation program. So we've got some flexibility that we're building in as a contingency as well.
Also with that, Mr. Scanlon, it's our intent to have NET with us for a minimum of the first 8 weeks. Actually, we'll have it for 12 weeks, and then it'll kind of drop down the numbers. But at any given point, and this will definitely be a whole nother discussion when we get to those change in inclement weather, when the winter approaches. Now we'll be in a better position that we can reach out and instantaneously have a group of people that we can call to help us on those bad days in winter, that will already be equipped with the knowledge base of the student assignment plan. They'll know how to get that information, so we don't have to look at maybe trying to go out to a staffing firm, if you will, and then worry about, we only need them for a couple weeks and it takes a couple weeks to train. So we've never had that option. So now this will put us in a position that if necessary, we need to increase staffing due to high volumes throughout the year. We have that access available.
Okay, thank you. The next question I had, I know that, and I guess this is for both Student Transportation of America and for OPS, since there is a lull in the summer timeframe for a lot of employees, is there any way to try to structure some retention bonuses to get incentives for both organizations to have a better idea of how many drivers are going to be returning in the fall?
Okay, that kind of goes back to our process of reaching out, continuing to bring them in. We haven't seen a need to offer anything as far as a retention bonus just yet, but that's something we can look into going forward. It's a great idea. We had put something in place like that previously, but then when we got the routing numbers, it didn't necessitate that we do that. So if we think we have a need that we need to keep a certain number around, we definitely put something like that in place. Okay. One other thing, can I correct my answer to Mr. Perlman? That'll be 100%, not 97. Okay. Thanks.
Then I guess, or do you have anything to add to that?
In terms of transportation, I personally can't speak to bonuses in terms of that, but we have a different situation in special education versus regular ed. And in regular education, they tend to start with a high number of drivers or a high number need for routes, and the routes kind of go down as the year goes on. Whereas in special education, that number generally starts low and it goes up. So we, at the beginning of the year, I'll feel comfortable with our start up in terms of having enough staff for the startup. Where it becomes more of a struggle for special education is going on the long run, because the routes are constantly special education students, the IEPs, those come just continuously. So it's more about the long run for us versus the start.
And then I guess, speaking of the special ed, is this the first time you're doing a dry run with the?
This is the first time we're doing a collaborative effort to have everybody do it all at once. And that's, from an optics standpoint, that allows me and Mr. Prince to canvass the city and see what's going on for everybody at one time. I just think it's a great look for everybody, but in terms of regular year to year, preparing for the year, is part of a normal process for special education to go to the doors and meet the parents each year.
We will monitor that just like it would be a regular day, and we've instructed our employees that it's just like being on time on a regular day. So the routes will start at the scheduled times that we receive from OPS Transportation. It'll run and get to the schools at a designated time. At that point, if we notice that any buses are running late for any reason, we'll bring them in, talk to them, find out why. If it's some error as far as them starting late, you know, we have enough excess capacity now that if someone's not running their route on time, we'll have to move to the next level and get somebody else there.
Okay. And how do you communicate that with the parents, that for the special ed, that's happening that day, so they know that to be home, or if they have to take time off work or anything?
On that day, generally, we don't send out a specific letter telling them the dry runs, but the goal is to have conversations with district communications, letting them know so that we can get something out broad that will let everybody. That's why doing it as a collaborative effort, we can position it as a joint thing. When I say all the buses will be out at one time, it makes it easier to get that communication out to everybody at one time.
I guess just my concern was that the parents would know that they'd be there to give that information that.
And
you said
historically,
that.
we've never had a problem with it.
Okay.
So I guess to answer your question, have we had something specifically in place? No, historically, the parents are generally home, and we have a high return. We check off each one of the buses to see who actually was able to make contact. They have information that they provide to the parents. If we have a not at home, they put an information slip in that house, and then the parents contact us, and then we set up those arrangements and have those conversations then.
Okay. And my last question is just about the tracking that we've been talking about for not just the buses, but for the individual students. Do you have an idea? I know you're in the communication process with some vendors. Would this be something that it would start as having a possible app for parents to track the bus and then evolve into something to where we're able to give, I don't know, bracelets or something to the students to be able to track them individually as far as getting on and off the buses?
We're still getting that type of information. That's part of the process we're still working with. I didn't see necessarily bracelets or whatnot, but there was just different areas that the vendors came with. Obviously, this time, there's nothing in terms of retina checking the eyes, but there were things like Bluetooth and things of that nature that some of the vendors discussed. But I don't know where that will go. Like I said, we want to make sure we do it right, and so we're kind of just taking that process. That will come probably in further discussions where I can update the board where we're at on that.
Okay, yeah, I just appreciate that, because on the few instances that we've had, it's very challenging, I'm sure, for dealing with some special needs kids that I believe one of the students that was left on a bus was mute, and I mean, just things that we can try to increase our chances that we are able to track our students as effectively as possible.
And I think one of the things that will really make a difference in that is not so much the bracelet as it is the tablets. Being able to visually see the student that gets on the bus will make a big difference with that process.
Mrs. Cassidy.
Well, hello, everyone. The newbie here had a couple comments. First of all, I just want to say that obviously this is my first board workshop, and this is a great one for me to take part in. I am a parent of 2 small children that are bused daily, so even though I was not here last year, I felt quite a bit of your frustration as well. I'm very happy to see everything that I've heard this evening. I mean, nothing but positive. I love I'm a parent that embarrasses my kids and goes out and meets the driver. And I love the fact that both my students have had the same driver pretty much throughout the year, give or take. So I love that piece that you're trying to retain drivers and keep the same driver for students. I think that's great. We were also talking a little bit over here amongst ourselves, and I told Mr. Perlman I would ask this question, that he had a follow-up. Are you going to do any kind of dry run for your phone system before, like pretty much like you're doing with the drivers and the routes?
Where we will use that time frame is, I believe it's August 7th. We have that time frame once those letters go out.
Okay.
And so we'll start getting the calls, and we'll be able to work through the hiccups during the letter notification time frame going out. That'll give us at least a week or two to really run through it and see what changes we need to make and address it. And we'll work together closely to make those changes leading up to the first day.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other board questions on the transportation part? I want to thank Mr. Scanlon actually brought up the question I was going to ask, was how, if we notify the special education parents that there is going to be someone coming to talk to them to make sure that they're there. I would be remiss, I think I've done this every time we've had a workshop about transportation, to not say that I really hope that now that we have the new student assignment plan that addresses middle school and elementary school, that one of the next things we can look at is high schools, especially the fact that we do have 2 high schools, Burke and Bryan, Mr. A knew what I was going to say, that regardless of how far the student lives from the school, they don't get transportation to their home attendance area school. And I know that's something that people in my area are very passionate about, because I have some parents tracking how much they're spending on Uber and cab fares just to get their kid to school. So hopefully that's something we can tackle after we get through the implementation of our student assignment plan. Mrs. Godding.
And hopefully we'll get a bond on the ballot and get 2 new high schools built so that we can provide transportation to the Burke and the Bryan students, because until we get that done, we're probably challenged. But I agree, I hear it too, so, because those are the majority of the students who live in my area, because we don't have a high school.
I had a feeling you were going to pop in with that. If there's no other board questions, we will move on to our update about the student assignment plan.
Thank you. So I'm just going to briefly go over some of the impacts that we know the new student assignment plan will have on the district. To your point, one of the things we heard going through all of the feedback sessions and developing the new plan is that people agreed that the walk distance for neighborhood students going to their neighborhood school was too long. But knowing that we can't provide transportation to every student, we could not go down to 2 blocks or 3 blocks away from the school. We did in 2016-17, so last year, go from 2 miles to 1.5 miles at the middle school level, so a half-mile change. And we know that that increased the number of students that were riding or transported to their neighborhood school at the middle school last year. And then next year, we'll go from 1.5 miles to 1 mile at elementary school. So, we have moved in that direction to provide some additional transportation for our neighborhood students going to their neighborhood school. At the middle school and elementary school level, that is about 2/3 of all of our students. So a significant impact there for those families. The other, I think, major long-term impact of this plan is increased efficiency. So under the current student assignment plan and the one still in place for high school, you can live across the school district and pretty much be eligible for any school. The school district's 144 square miles. At middle school, there's 12 middle schools. It can make for some very inefficient routing. Small numbers of students going to specific schools from isolated areas in the district. So going from a student level eligibility plan to a geographically based eligibility plan and creating the partner zones, as you've seen in the number of buses or routes that are needed for 2017-18 school years, it's definitely reduced that need, and Travis can, I think, attest to this, increased ridership on those routes that we do have. So I think going forward, hopefully this plan will continue to increase efficiency as we get more families that are coming into the district under the new student assignment plan. Right now, this changeover year is probably the most difficult. You'll have families that are still kind of entrenched in the old plan, but going forward, we'll get the real impact of this change as we have more school years under our belt. The other thing we heard from a lot of different sources is that the community and the district, for that matter, people inside of the district, wanted a simpler plan. We think that, I'll stop real quick and say I'll be the first person to say that student assignment plans in large school districts are not simple. But our goal was to try and take as much of the nuance, as much of the complication, and put it onto the district by creating resources that are available to families. So we have a website and an application that allows families to find their neighborhood school, as well as identify if they're eligible for transportation to their elementary school or middle school, be it their neighborhood school or a school of choice. So that's the first time in the district that's been available online, not having to speak to one or multiple individuals. Additionally, we have a student assignment plan video in multiple languages, just updated by district communication to be a little more timely in terms of for the 17-18 school year. Those are all available for families, new families or current families that want to get to know the plan. We have our website that's kind of a one-stop shop for student assignment plan information. We put boundary change information out there when we do have those. So a number of resources available in one location to try and give families and students the information they need to not necessarily make the plan simpler, but to make it simpler for those people trying to understand it. Additionally, we know that in going to the partner plan, we've reduced the number of choices available to families with transportation. But one of the things we wanted to maintain was choice available to all schools for families. And when I say choice, the ability to apply to and attend, if there is space, to all schools. while you may have to provide transportation, we did not want to limit students from any geographical area being able to apply to attend a given school. We just wanted to be more efficient with our use of the transportation to get there. And then finally, we know that this has a direct impact on a number of families that from 2016-17 school year were receiving transportation that will have that taken away from them in their current situation in 2017-18. Now, we identified back in 2015 about 3,800 students that looked like they'd be impacted in 2017-18 by this plan. We've adopted a pretty aggressive 2-year communication plan that for the most part has been carried out by OCSFE and student placement, as well as district communication. We've contacted some families numerous times, 4 and 5 times in terms of via mail, via robocalls, or other types of communication. So Annie's going to go through kind of that whole chain of communication, the timeline going back multiple years, and kind of show you how that 3,800 student number has gotten down to a much more manageable number as we've gone through that plan.
Thank you. And yes, I guess I really want to start with saying we are going to hear, there are always challenges at the beginning of the year, and I think that already people want to say it's because the student assignment plan. In fact, I talked with Casey today. I had a parent that called and was very upset, and I think she posted on Facebook about how the student assignment plan was really taking things away. But in looking at her child's situation, her child is transitioning from elementary to middle school and would not be eligible for transportation under the current plan, and is not eligible for transportation under the partner plan. So I think that people are upset and that we have to be prepared to hear that. But we do want you to know we spent 2 years working with our community, our families as well as our community partners, to really make sure that they're understanding the plan and how we can support and get information out to our families. And so the first slide really kind of summarizes what I know you've all seen. This is what we did 2 years ago when this plan was first voted on by the board, and that we sent out communication to 2,000 homes for families that would be in school that would be impacted by the plan when it was implemented. And so that was anybody who was in pre-K through 6th grade. Now obviously in 2 years those students have moved on, but these are the students. We initially took a look and identified about 3,800 students at the time that were attending a school where, based on the implementation of the plan, would be losing transportation, and had a 2-year communication with them to say we've called them, we've sent them several postcards, mailings, we've done presentations, and then even our school selection process for the past 2 years has identified those families and said, we want to make sure that you are aware in 2017-18, if your child is still attending this school, they can certainly stay. And that's the bottom line. Families need to know their children may stay at whatever school that they're currently enrolled in. Just the transportation piece is what is changing. And we've had many families that have committed to transporting their own children because they're committed to the programs in the schools that they're in. So that first year, we spent that time, as I said, we started with the 3,800, and with communication in the school choice process, we did see a reduction to 3,200 after our school choice process. As Travis said when he started, we have a very mobile population, and many of our families have moved even in the 2 years since we've started this, and they made sure that their choices were into areas where they could maintain their children in the school of their choice, or they moved their children to their new home attendance area school. And then in the summer of last year, we hired extra staff to contact, by this time we were down to 2,700 families, and to contact all of those families directly by phone. If we couldn't get a hold of them and we had their email address, we sent an email to communicate to them about the changes that were coming. What I really want to highlight for you is the changes that we've done in this last year, this current year, because we really got involved with our school staff responding to the families. I had a principal that said, you know, it's nice that the central office is reaching out to families, but they don't know who you are. When I call up a family, they know who I am. And so the principals all sent letters to the families that were impacted by the implementation of the partner plan, as well as staff calling for different programs. Mr. Scanlon, you know we did a great deal of work at Crestridge with the dual language program, and I like to highlight that that staff at Crestridge did an outstanding job. We had about 100 students that were going to be impacted, and we've had almost 3/4 of them commit to finding other ways to get to school, or having family and friends that will help transport them. So just a lot of effort from the community has really helped to kind of reduce that, and so families have made choice to stay in their current schools. This past February, when we did our school selection process, in addition to giving the selection materials to students that are transitioning from one school level to the next, we also made sure that all of our families that were impacted also received a selection form that communicated, again, if you would like to stay in your school, you certainly may, but if you want to make a choice because transportation is something that is really impacting your family, here's all the information about that. We directed everybody to the website that Casey had mentioned, and by the spring, we had about 800 students from that initial 38 that we hadn't heard back from or had communication with, didn't turn in the selection form, and so we called them as well. At the same time, after our current school selection process, we identified about 800 more students that made choice to a school next year where they will not be eligible for transportation. We didn't want to assume that just because they checked it on the selection form that they knew that they were not going to be receiving transportation. So we hired additional staff this summer to contact all 1,600 of those families and just make sure that they were aware that their children will be attending a school where they would not be receiving district-provided transportation. We are at the end of those calls, but the next thing that we have on our agenda is we're working with our transportation colleagues that have the transportation call center. We're also working with IMS to have the TAC operator at the beginning of the year gets a variety of calls about how do I enroll in school, how do I transfer schools, do I get transportation? So we're working to have expanded operators here at the TAC building to be able to address those questions. And if it's a question specifically about where is my school bus, we can transfer that right into the transportation call center. If the questions that they get are about, well, I had a bus last year, how come I'm not getting a bus this year? We've worked with them to also be able to identify if a student is attending a school where they would be eligible or not eligible for transportation, and if they find it's a student who's not eligible, can transfer them right back into us where we can help them. We will have our enrollment fair at the beginning of the year. We're right here in this room, but that call center will be staffed with content knowledgeable staff who can address the questions about everything from where is my bus, or who do I call, can I move my bus stop, to does my child need supplies on the first day? Because those are the calls that come into this building at the beginning of the school year. So that's just kind of a summary, and I hope, Mrs. Gotting, that I addressed your question about the communication. It's ongoing, we're continuing it, but I am not convinced that at the start of the year, we will still not have parents that will call and say, what do you mean I don't get a bus for my child to school? And I think you're all going to get them as well. Hopefully we've put in place a lot of different proactive measures to respond and help families, but it may be for some of our families at the beginning of the year that they will have to make choices about returning to their neighborhood school or making a new choice for school. Also working collaboratively with our kids club, they expanded their hours and operations as well. So I think we've tried to do everything we can think of. If there's anything else, we still have a month and we're willing to try. So thank you.
Mrs. Gotting.
Well, I want to thank you for addressing that, and I know that Casey has been I mean, we wouldn't be here today if he wasn't truly the project lead on so much work that had to happen, the development of the website, the redrawing of boundaries, and all of the stuff that had to happen. So I guess I know we have a number of new board members, and I just want to encourage you to really think about that SAP website, because when I get calls from people, sometimes I'll get calls from someone whose relative is moving into town and going to live with them for a while, and they want to know where to go to school. If you go to that SAP website, you can put in the address, and it has been, I've used it so many times with people who have called me and said, what do I have as far as eligibility, or what's my home attendance area school? And it's just been a great conversation to have with folks. And I know that we will hear from some of those 1,600 families, but we must just be really committed to the process that has been undertaken. It's been seriously over 3 years of getting to this place and really helping to become more efficient. And we can't make exceptions because we were operating even this past year under 3 different transportation plans, and that becomes really hard when you're grandfathering everybody and trying to figure out what's going on. So I want to thank staff, and I know we need to be strong for the sake of staff who have been giving the message. And I guess the only question I would ask is, are we prepared from a staffing standpoint if all of a sudden we discover, oh, you need a new kindergarten classroom in a building because all of a sudden this whole group of kids now discovers they need to go to their home attendance area school? I don't know. I guess I'm curious to know, because it's still quite a few people, even though we think
I was trying to get the eye of Mr. Wakefield over there, but yes, we have been meeting regularly with our HR department regarding the capping report, and looking at it almost daily for certain schools. As we've been moving students this summer, as we've called families and they're making a choice, I think, Mr. Wakefield, I don't know if you want to address the contingencies that I know your department's put in place.
And as he's coming up, one thing I would say is we do that every year. We always find some movement that we didn't anticipate, and so we have shifting staff that will end up moving from school A to school B. So I'm not sure it will be that much different than normal, but we will have some shifting staff, either moving from another building where the enrollment went down or just adding staff, one of the two. So that is an annual event with the amount of students we have. There's some flexibility, and the mobility. The mobility is the issue.
And Mr. Evans is right. Just this morning, HR staff went through every school by school, looking at enrollment as compared to staffing to see where we had extra staff and where we might need more staff. Identified still several schools to continue to watch. We're currently 98% filled at the elementary level, 87% at the secondary level. I sent Mr. Evans on Sunday, and I forgot what the exact number was, 87. So we're doing very well with that. We continue to watch that. We have conversations with principals. We have talked with special ed staff about alternative staffing models where we struggle filling teachers. So just a continued conversation, and we're definitely prepared for that.
Great, thanks.
Mr. Snow.
Thank you, Madam President. Again, just to echo off of Ms. Godding, first of all, I want to thank the Student Assignment Plan Committee for taking on this challenge. It's been a long 3 years leading this. We have some board members that are no longer with us that were on that committee. Katie Underwood that chaired the committee initially, and Ms. Williams, who's not here, and Ms. Godding was also, as well as on the committee as a steering force, also to research, and Casey for holding his ground when everybody put pressure on him, including myself. But I think this is an effort that this was a committee that was originally established when the board, the new board members of 9 got together on really establishing efficiencies with the student assignment plan, and it was really eye-awakening when we did get in that committee, and our board secretary, Mr. Ray, expressed to us that every other plan was being grandfathered in, and we said, starting literally almost 3 years ago, we will not grandfather these programs, these other student assignment plans in, and I cannot echo even I continue to echo what Ms. Godding said, that we have to stand firm on that, because I think that's what got the district in the past, of allowing exceptions. And I think this is a great plan to start off with. Obviously, we're not going to reach every family that we reach out to, but I go back to April, I go back to March, where we were having this conversation, and you guys were already reaching out to a lot of these families. And to be honest with you, that is very admirable to be doing that, and doing it way in advance. A lot of our families that are moving with the high mobility rate, they probably won't even know they're moving until a couple of weeks or know where they're going to be living. And that's just something we have to expect. As long as we're doing our due diligence, we can only be thankful for that. So thank you again, Annie, and having your department take these calls and call these families over and over again and send these letters through. I would not having the open transparency that your department has had with us on telling us how much you guys have really reached out to these families is significant. And just like that app, if you guys want, I think it is mobile friendly because I did go into that. So if you want to go on that student assignment plan website, you can put that in there. The only thing you have to worry about is make sure they give you the right address. So with that, thank you.
I think Mr. Perlman identified some problems with the mobile stuff, so we work with our vendor to get that fixed up, change a few things. I think it does work a lot better on mobile devices now. It only gives you the map if you ask for it and sizes it correctly, so.
And if any one of you are interested in just to sit down a quick, how do I access the website and how do I go through it and what are the things I would look at? I know that we've done training with all of our transportation people and I think we have it down to a science. So if you'd like a quick tutorial, we'd be happy to do that for you.
And if we get additional feedback on, families or people that are reaching out to you about using that website, or if things don't work, I know we've had some other emails passed to us about problems with it. We want to try and keep it as up to date as possible and fix things that don't work. So don't hesitate to reach out and let us know if you find things that aren't working.
Mr. Perlman.
I just want to, again, thank the staff for being responsive to some of the issues that I have brought up with just the communications issue on the student assignment plan through the websites, and there has been a lot of improvement. But I do have to, and I am one of the new board members who wasn't here for the implementation of all these changes, and I understand them, but I want to relay the concerns of a large number of my constituents who have concerns about the future of the magnet schools and the effect that this will have on this. Now, I know there will still be options for students in the districts to attend other schools. It's just a matter of transportation, but I'll be interested to see, in the years ahead, how this does impact the ability for students to choose a school within OPS that fits them best, and the impact that this may have on resegregating the district. And that's a real concern of mine, because the magnet program and the transportation was what followed the changes that had happened 30 years earlier. What happened in the 90s with the magnet school. So there will be a lot of families who can drive their children to the schools that they choose, but there's a lot of families who are going to be left out and unable to get their children to the schools that best fits their needs. And so that's not even me speaking, although I am a parent of someone who was able to have their child bused to a magnet school, and it was one of the best opportunities we had, but that's definitely a concern that's been shared with me, and I just want to pass on.
I can respond, and just to, Matt was shaking his head. I think if you go back to the original student assignment plan, when the majority of the magnets were produced, the plan that we will have in place, the partner plan, is very similar to that. I think at some level, limiting the number of students or the students that can go to specific schools will actually strengthen some of our magnets. When every school is an option, one doesn't necessarily stand out. So I think that while it will be difficult in the short term to say now this group of students doesn't have the ability to go with transportation, we worked very hard to create partner zones that were very diverse, both socioeconomically and racially. So I think that we tried to take all of those things into account, understanding that there was not a perfect system to create. If you wanted to create a perfect system, you'd have to spend a lot more money than we were already spending. But what we found, I think, is a middle ground, and this is not to say that it will stop here. I've worked in the district for 11 years, and we've changed the student assignment plan to some degree almost every single year. So it's a work in progress. You know, there's been major overhauls, and then there's year-to-year changes. There's, you know, changes in attendance boundaries that will, you know, if a second bond will cause us to build additional middle school, you know, we'll have to change attendance boundaries across the district in reaction to that. So that'll change the plan. Opening up additional space at schools will also have the ability to change the plan. There'll be the ability to offer more seats where now there are not seats at middle school. So I think going forward, this is something that the research division and other members of the team will be watching. It's something we're extremely aware of, understanding we can't solve all the problems and we don't have a perfect solution, but that's always what we're working towards. So your concerns, I believe, are our concerns and the team concerns as well.
No, I really appreciate that. I know the decisions aren't made haphazardly, and I do think that you have come up with the best next thing. So I don't want to come off as saying otherwise. It's the best of what's next, but there's just some concerns. But I appreciate it.
Dr. Holman.
Just really quick, if there were parents who were interested at this point in time, I know we're getting pretty close to the school year beginning, that were interested in seeking out a partner school instead of the school that they're already registered with, are they able to do so? And
Yes.
Okay, great.
If you have any families that are interested in making a different school choice at this point, they can certainly come in to the placement office and do a school transfer request. I would make sure that they understand we do have quite a few schools that are at capacity. But if there's a space available in a school, families certainly have that option. And if transportation is their need, we will sit down with them and really look at where there's openings, where they would be eligible for transportation. And if they don't, for whatever reason, get in now, certainly, let me get the dates right, August 8th through the 22nd. The first day of school is the 17th, but the 8th through the 22nd, as I said, will be right here, and they can sit down and talk one-on-one with somebody. But if they have the opportunity, they can certainly come in now. The placement office is open from 7 in the morning until 4:30, until we go back to our regular hours.
And then are they able to call just to see if the building is at capacity prior to coming down and then finding out that the building is at capacity?
You know, some of them are so close that
Okay.
they may call me right now, and I would look and say, yes, I see we have space, and by the time they get here, and plus, everybody in the office is working on requests now, so I don't know what's sitting on desks, and we try to take them in the order that they come, so the families that have been in, that we're processing those first. But yes, please have them come in.
Great, thank you.
All right, I also want to say thank you I know that this has been, I think, almost the whole time we've been on the board. We've been discussing that we needed to make a change because it was point blank confusing. I remember having friends who were having kids and they'd say, well, what school can my child attend? And say, well, they can go to any school, but this determines if you get transportation here and this determines if you get transportation here. And being able to send them to just, okay, go to this website, type in your address. You can still go to any school, but it'll tell you like your home attendance area and all of that. I think it is a nice change in the right direction for us, most definitely. And definitely I think we'd be foolish to think everything's going to be perfect on the first day. There's going to be hiccups. There's going to be people who, even though they said they understood they wouldn't get transportation, life situations happen. And now they need transportation. And I think it is important that we as board members, because we will have people call us and contact us, that we just get them in touch with the people they need, but also hold firm of this is the plan that our district has adopted and is using.
I think is good of a job as Annie's department or student placement does at trying to give every family the resources that they need. There's not a plan that we could create that would give every family the school that they want with transportation. So, right. So I think that the placement office does as much as they can to make that happen, but just like everything else, HR is trying to staff as efficiently as possible, so it's not like we staff for having a number of extra seats available. These are the number of students, so you staff for that, just like these are the number of students, so this is what we need for buses, so.
Mr. Snow.
Sorry about that. I just was waiting to hear this, but I maybe someone said it, but if you compare our school district to other comparable school districts, we still give far more transportation options than school districts our size or larger. So that's something to really show people and let them know that comparing to other school districts, Omaha Public Schools does provide significant transportation for our students. So, thank you.
Very true. Mr. Ray?
Travis, when will parents get notification of their routes or their?
That information will come out the first week in August. It should, I think the last week in July, it will be at Print and Pub, and then Mr. Priestman and his team will get that out that last week in July. So they should start getting it right the first week of August.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments from board members? Seeing none, this workshop is adjourned at 8:24 PM. Thank you.